Good evening. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Jamestown Public School Board to order. It is Monday, March 3rd, 2025 at 5:15 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room in the middle school. We'd like to welcome all those in the audience this evening. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we have students in the audience tonight. Your section will be coming up just shortly, and then I'll give you instructions to meet me over on this side as your name is called. Dan, would you be willing to read the board norms?
The board-developed norms are to share and respect opinions and speak with united voice once a decision has been reached. Execute all duties of the school board in compliance with North Dakota Century Code. Properly prepare for meetings and commit to assessing board effectiveness and ensure high-quality governance for all stakeholders.
Thank you, Dan. We have no public communication. Under conflicts of interest, I have a conflict with number 5A, the approval of the partnership with University of Jamestown. That is my department, so I won't be voting on that one. Any other conflicts of interest to declare? Melissa?
I have a conflict with the same area there, and then I also have a conflict when it comes to the contract with Ben Smith as I work with him.
Okay. Any other conflicts of interest to declare? Jacob?
Yep, the resignation of Zeb Miller is in my wife's department.
Okay. Okay. Any other conflicts? Okay. We had some declared previously, and then anything else? Any other conflicts of interest for the board? Okay. All right. Moving on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion? Motion by Steve. Is there a second? Second by Jason. We have a motion and a second for the consent agenda. Is there any discussion or any items you'd like to remove from the consent agenda for further discussion or clarification? Any items? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Nothing under other. Moving into our regular meeting. So we have some recognition tonight, and this is one of my favorite parts. Jacob, would you read the Life Smarts team? And then students, as your name is announced, just please come right over here. I have a little item for you, and then go up to the stage for a photo, and we'll just take a picture of everyone together.
All right, Jamestown High School Life Smarts team captured the North Dakota State Life Smarts Championship on February 12th. Team members include Ryan Solinsky, Carson Bayer, Jaden Goodmestad, Ethan Otley, Shane Martin, Marshall Krieger.
You can come up if you want to take a picture up here. Feel free.
So our next group is the North Dakota All-State Academic Team. Owen, would you read those?
The school board would like to congratulate students who placed at the North Dakota All-State Academic Team. So Lucas Schlepitz earned a bronze medal, and students who earned honorable mention were Ryan Slensky, Cody Veltkamp, Jayla Hoffer, and Olivia Carinta.
And congratulations to all of the students that received those awards and worked very hard to study and practice and plan for these events. Moving on in our agenda, we have nothing under correspondence or reports. Under D, Strategic Plan Progress Monitoring, Strategic Focus 2, Leadership for Learning, Goal 2. Are you doing that one, Mr. Gaylor? Yep, okay.
Yep. Slide deck already. I'm having a little trouble with that not turning on, I guess. Okay. Well, I'll just go without. Thank you. And Dr. Leck, feel free to fill in if there's any gaps in this presentation. But Goal 2.2 under our Leadership for Learning strategic focus really has to do with educating the whole child. And so part of what we identified as a goal, and this comes right from our accreditation standards, so this ties in really well with what we're going to talk about next, is a focus on what we call non-academic skills in addition to academic skills. It says it's connecting. All right. So when we look to define non-academic skills, we've kind of approached that a little bit differently at all three levels. So I separated that out, or the presentation by the levels: elementary, middle school, and high school. But our goal is really that we identify those non-academic skills, and then we find ways to effectively communicate them to students and parents, and then also for us as educators to continue to focus on those non-academic skills. We do have some progress. Each level, again, has a little bit different progress. This is the process that we will be going through or have started at most levels. And so each of those levels is in a slightly different spot, but we want to make sure that we have plenty of input on our educator side, that we gather some input from our stakeholders, including students and parents, as we get those goals more and more refined, and that we are able to train teachers and have reporting platforms that can support effective reporting, because it's not something that we're necessarily used to, at least not on the level of what we've interpreted that strategic goal and what's in the standards within Cognia. So we've taken some steps at the elementary. We've identified our platform, which is able to do that. Empower Learning is able to be the platform to collect those skills and to monitor those skills over time. The elementary, we started out looking at a state framework that exists for life skills, and we found that to be a little bit more complicated than what we would have liked for elementary students and for teachers for utilization. And so about mid-year, as we were ready to start to roll that out, teachers gave us feedback, and our 3 of our schools are involved in what's called Tier 2 training for MTSSB, which is MTSS for behavior supports. Those schools that were in that process came and said, we'd like to take this back to our elementary leadership team and rethink how we're approaching life skills. So in our elementary schools, we have consistent school-wide expectations around the themes of being respectful, responsible, and safe. And we felt like it was going to be confusing to students to add additional life skills, things like perseverance, when those could be embedded in the feedback and the expectations that we're already teaching. So we put a proposal together and rolled that out to elementary staff on January 20th and got some really good feedback again from educators as they were in that presentation. And so we paused that and now are back to the drawing board based on that feedback. We have a ELT subcommittee that looks at those skills, and they are meeting again next week. At the middle school, having learned a little bit from what was happening in the elementary, the middle school has already, for a number of years, I'm not sure how many years, but have been giving feedback on what they call a citizenship grade. And that has revolved around pride in self, pride in others, and pride in school. And they've also got a system to support celebration of those skills and quarterly feedback for those for students in those non-academic skills. As they're looking at what they want their standards-based report card to look like, they're shaping and mirroring the elementary in thinking about respectful, responsible, and safe, and designing around the expected behavior that we have. Routines, procedures, expected behaviors all kind of fit with the development of students, and we think that it's important. In fact, in some ways it's as important or more important than some of the academic feedback we can provide. And they've got a draft that's under review. They're establishing what will look like, how frequently will we provide that feedback to students at the middle school level. The high school level is actually experiencing two different kind of pilots with this. One, I guess, it would not be a pilot, it'd be a practice, and that's that all of our CTE teachers already give feedback on what we call career-ready practices. So we've identified, based on a state list of 12 different elements, the state refined that down to just these 5 critical areas, and we actually are providing feedback and have been providing feedback to students for about 3 years on that framework of career-ready practices. So things like being a responsible employee, technical skills within that specific area, communication skills, problem solving, and teamwork. So students get that feedback through the PowerSchool platform. There's a whole nother tab within PowerSchool that says PowerSchool Standards, and you can click on that to be able to view that feedback, but we haven't necessarily published that to parents because our CTE teachers continue to learn about giving that feedback and what frequency is realistic with that feedback. So that's a pretty important set of skills, and I think career-ready practices resonates with people. The challenge is we've been implementing this for a few years, and now Advanced CTE has redone those career-ready practices, so the timing of deciding what our skills at the high school would be is kind of unknown, I guess, if we want to adopt one framework and then move to the next. But the practice itself, I think, is what we've learned a lot about, and that kids value, and we value the opportunity to give feedback in those areas. In addition to feedback, I think, is the importance of teaching those skills. Some of those are directly in their standards, and so they wouldn't be considered a non-academic skill, but some of them are very important in any context of life. Simultaneously, we also have, under Tony McIntyre's leadership, implemented a platform that around a set of skills that are defined at the state level. So the state of North Dakota got all these stakeholders together and said, here's a set of skills that we think a graduate should have. And they had identified them, and they identified degrees of accomplishment in those areas. So adaptability, communication, critical thinking, perseverance, learner's mindset, empathy, and collaboration were the skills identified by the state of North Dakota. In our English classes in their senior year, they have a capstone project, a larger project that they work on, and some smaller projects too. And Tony is basically piloting a platform. It's called the Mastery Transcript, or Mastery Learning Record is more specifically what he's using out of that platform. And it just paints this picture, and you can see that in your slide deck, probably better than you can see it up there. Paints a picture of those skills in a foundational level and an advanced level. And students can basically submit evidence, kind of like a portfolio, and then it gives you a visual of where they've submitted evidence. So in the schools where this platform is used. Some of them use it for graduation requirements, but some of them just use it to highlight students' strengths and then to be able to share that out when they're making their scholarship applications or to share that out when they're applying for a job so that people can see evidence behind the skills that the school has certified. So it's an interesting pilot, and as we look at students submitting that evidence, there's an instructor component where you have to certify that evidence, and we're just trying to determine what's realistic, if that's a viable platform or not, and appreciate Tony's efforts in kind of piloting that out. All right, overall, we're still in the very early stages of identifying these skills and the processes for measurement. We're getting some proof of concept and getting educator feedback, and our next steps really are to gather that wider stakeholder feedback on what the skills are and how that information might be useful. We did, in our accreditation, receive some feedback on that we've begun that process, but need to continue that process as well. So I do have a few action steps here to continue alignment and pilots and planning at all 3 levels, and then start to get into more of that community and family feedback so that we can refine our non-academic skills. I'd stand for any questions you might have on that goal or feedback as well.
Thank you, Mr. Gaylor. Are there any questions from the board? Any questions? Jason?
When we get into talking about non-academic skills, like, for example, responsible arriving to class on time, what does that look like then on our new 1, 2, 3, 4 scale? Is there, what would a report card look like? I guess my main question is how will that be meshed with school policy in itself? Does that make sense? Because we're talking about a whole different, ball game when we talk about non-academic skills. What will the parents expect to see if expectations aren't being met?
Great question. So some schools, middle schools and high schools that have activities will tie the non-academic performance to eligibility for students. There's a real steep climb to get there in your confidence and accuracy. So what you're talking about with your first question is, again, it would be on a 4-point scale, and you essentially build out what those proficiency scales are. So we're further in the process at elementary. Middle school is working on the process for that. In high school, they've just adopted some frameworks that already exist and are on that 4-point scale. So both the state Portrait of a Graduate has descriptors for the scale, and the career ready practices also have those descriptors, and they're on a 4-point scale, with 3 meaning the expected behavior and 4 exceeding the expected behavior or skill.
And some of those benchmarks, parents won't necessarily need to wait until conferences or report card time for some of those, correct? Like if it's a chronic issue?
So that's what we were challenged with at the elementary level is the assumption is that every student starts at a 3, right? When it comes to behaviors, expected behaviors. Those are what we're teaching to, that's what we expect, that's what we build our routines and procedures around. And so to be able to collect evidence on that in our platform, teachers would have to enter 3 3s just to start the year, and then as they're providing corrective feedback and lessons, they'd be able to adjust on a behavior scale. When we're talking about skills at the high school level, so responsible employee or teamwork and that sort of thing, that's a little bit different because you have to submit evidence that you can, and so we have to set up the opportunity for them to submit that evidence rather than just looking at the expected behaviors. We haven't started to discuss at the high school, should we just all coalesce around respectful, responsible, safe, but then you build out those durable or life skills that are important within that same framework. It's a little bit different at each level would be the answer.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. All right. Is there a motion for Strategic Focus 2, Leadership of Learning Goal 2? Motion by Jamie. Is there a second? Second by Dan. We have a motion and a second for Strategic Focus 2, Leadership for Learning Goal 2. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Under Board of Education, we have Strategic Competency Cognia Accreditation Review. Mr. Gaylor, as long as you're standing
Yeah.
up there, you want to share that with us?
Yeah, thank you. Excuse me. So our overall score, which is what everybody looks for, is a 321, which 300 and above means that you'll be accredited and you have noteworthy practices. I'm told that that's a fairly high score, and so we're excited about the overall score, but really where we start to make a difference is identifying from these findings what's valuable for our strategic plan. So that's kind of the lens that I took in analyzing this, and that's the lens that we're asking our district school improvement team to look at this report, is what of this is important at your building level and the impacts, and then what's important for the strategic plan. I'm going to highlight a few areas that I think are really important, and the board will receive the full report, but currently this is a preliminary report until it goes through its quality assurance process, which means that a few other external reviewers within the Cognia organization need to look at this and say that it makes sense based on the evidence that we submitted. First thing I want to highlight is our noteworthy practice, which is that we prioritize our students' or learners' well-being, creating a positive, safe, inclusive environment that promotes emotional growth, builds resilience, strengthens connection between student, staff, and community. If there's something you want to be commended on, it's that kids, as one of our DSI members said, kids, feel cared for in school, and kids that are cared for learn. I think that's something to definitely hang your hat on. There's two standards that are connected to that noteworthy practice, and that has to do with how leaders cultivate and sustain a culture that demonstrates respect, fairness, equity, inclusion, and is free from bias, and learners' well-being is at the heart of the institution's guiding principles. So when they look at our mission and vision, when they look at the leadership that is provided by you and others in the district, they believe that we cultivate a culture that's supportive of learning. So pretty important, and that's our noteworthy practice. The other thing people want to look at right away is what are the areas of improvement that they've identified. So when I say that they've identified this, really that's our district school improvement team. That's the Elliott reviewers that go into the classrooms that help us identify these areas. So a lot of our own, we have the expertise within to identify the areas to grow, and it was confirmed by the people that came in and did our review. And two areas for targeted professional development, one in integrating digital tools, and they have, excuse me, a very specific definition of what that looks like. So it has to do with students integrating digital tools to produce unique works, integrating digital tools for collaboration, because those are things that are emphasized in the workplace. The other piece that they said was cultural awareness into the curriculum, and that has to do with implementing resources, as we've talked before, where you have windows into other cultures and then mirrors to see yourself reflected into that culture, or into other into the curriculum. So those are two important things that they identified. Development of teaching strategies that incorporate interactive and student-centered instructional methods to improve student engagement. I can interpret that. There are two standards that have to do with that, and that's that students are engaging in experiences that improve their self-confidence and love of learning, and that instruction is monitored and adjusted to deepen individual student knowledge of and understanding of the curriculum. So that has a direct connection to our work within SBL and student engagement and confidence in learning. So by being more clear with what we want from students and paying more attention to what their individual by student, by skill level is, we'll be striving to reach that area for improvement as well. The last one is to increase opportunities for student voice and engagement. Excuse me. And that's specific to Standard 19, which is that students or learners are immersed in an environment that promotes and respects student voice and responsibility for their learning. Again, there's a direct connection, and a lot of our DSI members made that connection to standards-based learning, increasing student ownership of that learning by being really specific about what we want students to know and be able to do, and then for them to be able to even self-monitor their learning, at a developmentally appropriate level. The other thing that it means, and I had to ask this question of the reviewer, is that we need more opportunities for student voice in the decision-making in our schools. So things that we've done in the past, like student summits, how might that apply across different levels? Or some schools have student cabinets, whereas other schools don't have anything like that. They don't have a student advisory type of group. So that's something to aspire to. It's something that's currently not explicit in our strategic plan, but it might be something to think about or for the board to consider. Overall, I'm proud of what has been shown to us and excited to maybe be able to share the full report with you guys. When it comes to our analysis of each of these areas, they rated, and that is the DSI team's work every year, is to do that analysis of student performance, to do that analysis of student engagement. They rated us at a 4 level in almost every one of those areas, and the network average usually hovers around a 3. And so they were impressed with our analysis and coming up with building level goals based on building level data that then feeds up to you guys to set the strategic priorities for the district. Each of the individual standards get a rating as well, and we were above the network average in all but about 3 of the standards, and that kind of corresponds with our areas for improvement as well. I think I'm going to leave it there, and probably we'll have another opportunity, or the board will for sure get the full report once it's gone through quality assurance, and would stand for any questions on things that I can answer at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Gaylor, and thank you for your work on this. Are there any questions from the board at this time? Okay. All right, no questions. And we do look forward to the full report as well, so thank you. Thank you. Next on our agenda, we have the superintendent's report. Dr. Leck?
Thank you. You have my written report. Looking at personnel, just an update to the board. My original timeline felt we might have a recommendation for a JMS principal at this meeting. Just with some further discussion on how timeline went for the interview process, we'll anticipate that recommendation at our next meeting. But the group is working. They've done a fantastic job thus far, and interviewed 4 candidates, and looking forward to further deliberation on that later this week. With the Washington Elementary transition, we are currently working on that FAQ that we've talked about before. Really, we're kind of holding back on that until boundary decisions are made. And once the boundary decision is made, because there's going to be so many questions related to boundaries, we wanted to make sure that include that in the FAQ. So as soon as that decision is made, we'll be able to prioritize that information. I'm happy to report that we have had an additional 3 placements with our certified staff since our last meeting. That leaves 1. And I already anticipate having that decision made with that last teacher at our next meeting. Some things already in the works there. Feel really good about that recommendation, but it will be dependent on some actions you take later on in this agenda. But I feel like we have a We're very close to having all of our teachers placed. We're looking at, then our next step would be our paraprofessionals. We have other staff that have already been placed, other non-certified staff that have already been placed, and I would anticipate by the end of March, we would have pretty much every placement done. And I feel really good about the process that we've done thus far and the how we've been able to match with preferences. I think that's been really a good step. It's been a lot of additional steps, but as I talk to our staff, they feel good about the process. So one of the things I want to point out is with, there is impact based on Title I. I have two staff members that will be placed in Title I or just general interventions. I do just want to point out, and I've had this discussion with the board before, but I continue to be disappointed with the state's transition to the USED model. That will impact us to around 90 to 100,000. The full allocation hasn't come out yet, but that, the additional amount to our general fund expenditures is more related to that USED model change than it is to the additional FTEs to Title I and to interventions. Had we had that full 90,000, and we're talking about half of that could have been devoted to this FTE shift into one additional FTE position. But I feel good about the placements. I think we certainly have needs in interventions. It is well worth the general fund obligation, regardless of how Title I funding breaks down. So it's well worth it. We certainly need the intervention support, but I'm happy to report that we're feeling really good about this process and being able to place our teachers and soon the rest of our non-certified staff pretty soon. With the next item that I have is the partnership with the University of Jamestown and the Lead the Way. Just want to recognize, just another example of, how this partnership with the University of Jamestown is so beneficial and how appreciative we are to the University of Jamestown to offering us this business partnership. But as you can read, it provides a 10% tuition discount for all of our JPS staff in certain programs. Now, it doesn't apply to the Teacher Leadership Academy, but it does apply to undergrad, business studies, communication studies, behavioral health, Master of Arts in Leadership, Master of Science in Clinical Counseling, MBA, Master of IT Leadership, and Doctor of Leadership programs. So in all of those instances, being employed by Jamestown Public Schools equates to a 10% tuition discount. So a very generous support by the University of Jamestown, and that'll be coming up later as approval for that business partnership. So we certainly thank them for making this outstanding partnership offer to us. I did include an updated survey timeline for community interest in a referendum. I see I left half a sentence written there. Leave of absence later on in the agenda. You'll have action on a leave of absence, and because of where the March 1st deadline fell, I wasn't sure what recommendation I would be making. We did not get a written notification. So when you make that motion, the appropriate motion would be, as I've written in quotes here, the voluntary resignation and waiver of the right for reemployment. You can reference that statement, and that aligns with policy. And that just means in our leave of absence policy, you can request that leave of absence, but you need to provide written notice of an intent to come back. If the intent to come back is completed by March 1st, then that continuing contract continues. In this case, we did not, so our assumption then is that voluntary resignation. With legislative updates, the Bill 2241 on charter schools really very easily passed the Senate, so we can anticipate that would, you would likely see the same over in the House. I was happy to see that micro schools did fail. It was narrow, but that did fail. A couple different examples from ESA, education savings accounts are still out there. I would draw your attention most to Senate Bill 2400. Whatever ESAs look like, it's not going to be any of these examples. There's going to be lots of different discussions and negotiations between what passes, what's amended and revised, and before a final comes out. But I draw your attention to 2400 because I believe it's going to likely look most like that. And that's simply my assumption, but I believe it's going to look, I think something in the ESA world is going to pass, and it will likely look similar to 2400. I did include House Bill 1222 this time, and that's a requirement for public school students to have the opportunity to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Easily passed in the House and will similarly pass in the Senate. 1369 I brought to your attention before as well, and that's the funding bill. Disappointing to see the House appropriations, or the House, I should say, in appropriations stripped down from 3% to 2%, elimination of the special ed factor. A separate bill to address EL weights also was unsuccessful. I believe, though, that there's still opportunities to have discussions in the Senate side about returning to 3%, getting that special ed factor increase back, and even the possibility for EL. I would like to see us even look to the at-risk factor as well. But we'll see. Those are big asks. But I would think I will say that I believe that our budget should be built around 3%, because I think that's what is likely to be the final bill. So 1475, disappointing to see universal meals for all K-12 students not be successful, but I do want to pass out that there was a separate bill that was approved. If you remember correctly, last session, there was a bill that approved that's reduced meals, or would be the difference would be caught up by the state. So there are full meals for anybody that is at 200% of the poverty level for completely reduced meals or completely free meals. So there is no reduced meals anymore. The state picks up the difference. What the House passed is increasing that from 200% poverty level to 225% poverty level. So there is some movement in that universal meals, although I still think that there is some level of momentum to bring back. The question has been, or what I'm hearing is that there was concern about 9 through 12 students and free meals and universal meals, greater level of support for K-8. So that's what we're hearing. I'm not sure I completely understand the logic, because we aren't, because the concern was many of our high school students leave campus and eat off campus anyway. They have open campus privileges, but those are not students we get reimbursed for. So I'm not really sure I understand. We might have to just help to educate that particular fact, because that is, that to me, I'm not exactly sure. One other bill that I would bring up is, I want to touch on it. I don't see where it is. It is the 2%, bill for that the Department of Public Instruction could issue a penalty up to 2% of foundation aid if a district is investigated and found to be not in compliance with thank you, 2104. While I was happy to see that the bill was amended away from shall to may, it's still one of those bills that I'm not sure I understand the intent, because it feels like a bug looking for a windshield to me. Like, I'm not sure I understand what problem we're trying to solve, and I have yet to find a specific example. Help me understand what isn't happening now that should be happening that would denote this bill, and I still have not heard that. And I would think that we would need to have some specific examples around what isn't being complied with currently that should be complied with, that precipitates a bill that has, executive branch overreach like this one does. So it still remains to me to be a concern, although I feel like it has the inertia to pass. The last thing I have is a spotlight. We decided to spotlight Pammy Schmiedeberg this month, and I want to recognize her for her commitment to reinforcing the importance of lifetime activities and also integrating them into the elementary physical education curriculum. So she was instrumental in adding archery to our elementary levels. And she has also, actually across the K-12 continuum, but she also received recently external funding to incorporate fishing into K through 5 elementary physical education. Beyond that, she serves as the SBL lead for physical education, and she is a very active member of our district wellness committee. So I just want to recognize Pammy and all of the work that she does, all the great work that she does and provides supports to our kids. So with that, I would stand for questions.
Yes, the board expresses their appreciation as well. Any questions regarding the superintendent's report? Okay, Jason.
So Bill 2104, the 2% or the investigation piece, will it be up to the superintendent then to determine the procedure for that?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just, I would hope that the process is everything at the local level has been, otherwise this could be a floodgate of just random, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but the process still should be, you know, exhaust every level of the chain of command at the local level. So, not that any of us have.
Yeah. I would hope that to be the case, although I'm somewhat dubious that administrative rules will be written that way. But again, I would just like to understand the rationale for why the bill. Give me some examples of what isn't happening. I think that's the most important piece that I have not yet heard.
Any other questions on the superintendent report? Okay. If not, moving on our agenda. We have nothing under old business. Under news business, we have nothing under activities. Under buildings and grounds, A, approval of elementary school boundaries. If you remember at our last meeting, we sent this to Facilities Committee to take a little bit deeper dive. We had all the information, but it was a lot of information. And also we just wanted, part of the facilities is our administrators, so we can understand operationally, how this looks and plays out. And so I would like to hear from our Facilities Committee. Aaron, would you want to start off?
Yeah, so we've met on this one at length and discussed the different pros and cons, just kind of walked through it logically in comparing each one against each other, and then how each one stands just on its own. So just starting with the 1A, which is basically the model where we define the boundaries and in an attempt to not affect as few people as possible. And then the 1B is more of a model where we're affecting more people, but then we're getting an improved balance from an operational and demographic standpoint. So really the only benefit in the 1A that we came up with is just the fact that, yeah, that's just for the initial implementation of this, it's the least intrusive. But there's still some issues with how we balance everything else in there, and that's where the 1B came in. There is a slightly more intrusive as far as the number of people it affects initially. But when looking at, that's a one-time, non-recurring type of con. There is a recurring benefit in being able to balance that, the demographic model, which then relates into operational efficiencies and how we can better instruct the kids with those demographics being balanced across all the different schools. And then along with that then is the benefit of not affecting, in the case that we do move forward with other changes to the district, facilities and whatnot, then this is basically, we don't have to affect people twice. It's, we can make the change to that a little bit more streamlined in the event that decision comes. So we also discussed the 1C model, and really going back and forth with some of the data on that. That one didn't really come out as any additional benefit. There was just some cons on how the number of people that are affected and how that long-term within the next 5 years and how that plays out. So that's where we came to the recommendation to proceed with the 1B boundary model, recognizing again that is a more intrusive, but it does give us a recurring benefit in the operational scheme and teaching the kids. So.
Thank you, Aaron. Jason,
One other
go
thing
ahead.
with that before I
Yep.
finish. We did couple in with the implementation side with this then, making sure that, okay, if we do this scheme, then what does that look like in terms of waivers and how we address rural kids. And so we want to couple, making sure we recognize that that's a part of all of this here as a part of the board review is, what that waiver scheme looks like and how we're treating the rural kids. So.
All right, thanks, Aaron. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Roberts did an excellent job of summarizing. I would just say, 1B, last meeting, our a priority is we don't want this to disrupt too many. That was kind of our, minimal number of people. I would just say that it's a little more of a bigger Band-Aid to pull off 1B, but if we talk about what's best for the entire district, not only now but in the long term, we feel it's a bigger bullet to bite, but it is the best option for all of the kids in elementary in the district. So other than that, Mr. Roberts did great.
Thank you, Jason. Steve?
I guess I don't have much to add, but the impact numbers, we did identify that those would be the max numbers. We don't know where that would fall exactly, but the numbers are a max number. It could be less than that.
All right, thank you, Steve. Dr. Leck, did you want to follow up with any?
Once the
or
board
there's
is done, I have some other thoughts.
comment? Melissa?
A couple of things. One of the things I'm noticing here is that you're talking about splitting families. Is that going to be the choice of the families, or is that going to be something that is going to be assigned by the district? And then the other thing is, if we're going to be moving all these families all over the place, I feel that is going to be something that the district should be providing busing, and wondering how that is going to affect the current busing situation.
So to your first question, there are some additional considerations. The committee did talk about it. If you look at the end of page 2 and into page 3, what's listed, what you're referencing are some additional considerations. And what those considerations do are, those are some operational things that we identified and discussed at facilities to further minimize. Steve talked about, you're talking about the maximum. Now remember, these two plans, 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, are built around the students, that every waiver would be eliminated. And you would simply move into whatever school you reside, whatever boundary you currently reside in, you are simply moving to that. And that is where the bulk of, outside of the retirement of Washington, in which we know there are a group of families and a group of students that, regardless of whatever option you select in boundaries, are going to be impacted. The question becomes, how can you minimize after those students that are going to be impacted because you're retiring a building? And so we did identify some other considerations that can minimize from that maximum of just taking everybody based on residence. And so one of the things that was discussed is we eliminate the waivers generally, kind of follow along with the plan that they've had, but starting in kindergarten. So any student that's in a grade 1 or a grade K now through grade 4, fifth grade students are going to be moving to the middle school, and it doesn't impact them anyway. But if you look at just implementing the boundaries, the hard residential boundaries for incoming new registrants. So basically honoring the waivers that have already been offered for every student in grades 1, currently in grades K through 4, okay, next year's 1 through 5. That would lessen that impact significantly, because now you're not moving those that have already been honored waivers. You're saying you waive to Roosevelt, well, you're still going to be able to go to Roosevelt. What you're referencing is, what if a family were to have a 4th grade student? It's those legacy waivers that I've talked about before. So say a student has a family has a 3rd grade student and now an incoming kindergarten student. If you're talking about making a hard line decision and say, okay, starting with kindergarten, that, you have to go to your boundary school and there are no waivers, that family would have to make a choice. What do they want to do with their 3rd grade student? Do they want to keep the one in Roosevelt and the other in Louis, where their residence is, or do they want to move both to the residence? That's the only option that would impact that, but that actually lessens the impact to the families because it's only those that have the legacy waiver. We're essentially eliminating that legacy waiver idea. The other factors that go along with that is, in the short term, if we don't go to hardline boundaries and take every student K through 5 or K through 4 and say hardline boundaries, we might have a handful of sections and a handful of grade levels and a handful of buildings that get larger than what we would like. And that's what we did that's what we looked at in item number 2 under those considerations, setting targets, caps, where we would introduce waivers again if a grade level gets above 22 for K through 2, because primary, the smaller grades, are a little focus area, and then 3 through 5 at 24. Now we look at class sizes and go, wow, that seems like a big number. Across the state, those are, we have elementary buildings across the state that are as high as 26, 27, 28. So us setting caps at 22 and 24 are not unreasonable. And that would be, if they hit that cap level, like we might in a 4th grade at Lincoln next year, if we make, looking at these boundaries and existing waivers, then we would open up waivers in a very limited capacity, specifically for that grade level in that building. So if you're assigned say there is a 4th grade that's a little bit larger, higher than that 24 per class, then you would open up the waivers for that specific group. And then you could use that to balance. The other side, and Mr. Roberts mentioned this, looking at the rural areas, right now we have established boundaries for all of the rural areas. If you live in this part of town, you're at Gustner or Washington or Roosevelt or Louis L'Amour. But we have other students, like our open enrolled students, and they're simply placed. And we can make common sense decisions just like we do with open enrollments, where, if a student lives south of town, well, we're probably going to recommend them, if they're outside of the city limits, to be in Roosevelt. If Roosevelt doesn't have the right balance, then the next choice might be Roosevelt, something that's next closer. We're not intentionally, going to push people further than they need to be, or if they're coming from the reservoir, we have Lincoln and Gustner that make more sense than other other buildings in the district. But that would be another consideration that we would put in place to say that we're to help us balance those class sizes, that we wouldn't have elementary boundaries in the rural areas, that we would just place them. And that would help us balance, and it would allow us to make some common sense decisions there as well. One other thing that I wanted to point out with the demographic distribution that I think is really important, we've talked about Title I, and we know that there would be a balance of those, and that allows us to provide equitable services even though we provide a general fund lookalike program, that is not at all done at the same level. We have fewer interventionists if that's the case. But beyond that, Title I has a lot of different, your access to grants are oftentimes determined by your free and reduced lunch percentage, your poverty level. And what this does is equalize that balance. Right now, if we adopt 1A, that's the range is 26 to 52%. That's, our lowest boundary school has 26, or our lowest elementary level would have 26% poverty, and our highest would have 52. If you look at 1B, that's 39% to 49%. That's very compressed. And there's lots of different benefits that I could talk about for that. The other factor, the only thing that I didn't hear that got brought up was after-school programming. That is our current grant for after-school programming requires Title I. That is one of the expectations to be eligible. So one of the eligibility requirements is Title I eligible. If we can get all of our schools to Title I eligible, every elementary family would have access to the after-school, or could have access to the after-school program. When we have, and I talked about this with the waiver analysis in the past, one of the biggest reasons we have waivers is access to after-school programming. And so if we had that at every building, you'd much more easily be able to say boundary schools. Now, we don't have that other family indicator that pushes people to request waivers. Summer program, yeah. But that, those are the conditions. The other conditions that we talked about, you had one question on transportation. I believe the impact of transportation is going to be fairly minimal. I would recommend that you maintain the same 10-block radius, and then you bus outside of the 10 blocks. But I think the impact would be minimal. I did ask on that. I haven't heard back from Harlow's yet on the specific impact, but my analysis would be it would be relatively minimal.
Go ahead, Melissa.
Just a follow-up question. If you're using the rural areas to kind of balance out those schools, I'm assuming that you're not going to each year move those students. They're going to be, it's a one and done balancing.
Correct. Thank you for bringing that up. But registration is the determinant. So if during registration we place them at Lincoln, that's where they're going, and that's where their siblings would go in that setting.
Aaron.
That would also apply to the open enrollment as well.
Correct. We would treat open enrollment and rural students exactly the same.
Any other comments from the facilities committee? Aaron, Jason, and Steve? Okay.
And just one thing that I just want to reinforce, the committee did hear the concerns about making the minimal amount of impact. To Mr. Roberts' points earlier, you are planning in advance for the potential for any facility changes, and there would be less impact actually if additional facilities or changes to the boundary were brought online. You'd actually be making less change. But that's also the reason why we felt so strongly about looking at those considerations to minimize the impact right now. I think that we have class sizes right now that we can accommodate the majority of those current waivers in our current K through 4 students. So I think that the impact outside of Washington, which would have to move regardless, is really going to be pretty manageable for families.
Jason?
So then, for families who are watching, when can they expect to hear from the district, or the next steps?
We'll work on the messaging on that once the decision is made and we can draft those FAQs. That's when we'll make those notifications out. And we're working with. We asked RSP already for maps to make sure that you can plot out where you're at. And right now we kind of have less detailed maps. It's just kind of in areas, and we want to drill down to get a little better sense. So, we plot into Power School so we can see when the registrations come in, what boundaries they would be in. But that would be coming in the next week and a half, 2 weeks.
Questions from the board, comments, any other? Again, I know the facilities committee spent quite a bit of time going through this and discussing all the options, and I appreciate their work on it. I, at first, was thinking minimal impact, but I appreciate the extra information that was provided in your work. Yep, go ahead, Melissa. Yep.
Sorry, I'm just thinking here as a parent, as a person who has major transition issues. If there is a fifth grader who is going to be affected by possibly having to be moved, is there a waiver that could be in effect? Because you're going to be moving a fifth grader and then you're going to be moving him again the following year. If we say no waivers and we have a situation like that, especially if they're on an IEP or something to that effect, are there going to be any type of exceptions to this this rule?
Just a reminder, we're talking about this year's fourth graders, their waivers would be honored. The only impact would be legacy waivers. And then a family would have to make a decision on what's best for their family. But in the instance you talked about, a current fourth grader that's waived to outside their boundary school would be able to stay in that boundary school because we're going to honor their waivers, the current waivers. But a new fourth grader moving into the district, and as soon as this would be enacted, they're going to be placed based on their residence. Moving forward, we're going to, every new registrant, whether they're kindergartner or a fourth grader, would be based on their residence. But current waivers, we'd honor. It seems like a happy middle ground. As happy as we can make it.
Any other questions for discussion? Is there a motion?
I move to approve the boundary option 1B.
There's a motion to approve boundary option 1B.
I second that.
And a second by Jason. Motion by Aaron, second by Jason. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? And, yep, and Christie's ready to do roll call vote if there's no other discussion or need more information. Okay, go ahead, Christie.
There was no conflicts for this one, right?
No.
Okay.
Owen McKenna. Yes. Jamie Bear.
Yes.
Heidi Larson.
Yes.
Jason Rohr.
Yes.
Jacob Meyer.
Yes.
Dan Tweeten.
Yes.
Aaron Roberts.
Yes.
Stephen Belkamp.
Yes.
Melissa Gleason. Unanimous pass.
Motion approved unanimously. And I think the community can understand by the questions and the discussion here that we're very appreciative of our communities and families' understanding. This is not a light undertaking of changing things for little kiddos, and so we just want the community to understand that we've put a lot of time, effort, and got second opinions on this before moving forward. And we have a lot of information that we purviewed, as well as having a committee even spending time taking deeper dives just to make sure we didn't miss anything. And so it was a lot of work undertaken by the board, and and if people have questions, we'll have a plan for some communication for this as we get more finalized with those boundary lines. And do you have anything to add about communication for this as well?
You know, I think Mr. Rohr asked a great question. I anticipate an FAQ in the next couple of, next 10 to 14 days. We'll get that out to our families. If there are questions, they can email me, but I would encourage people to, be patient and wait until that FAQ comes out, and then we'll be able to publish that and make sure that people understand what those implications are.
Thank you. We'll look forward to that. Moving on in our agenda, we have nothing under curriculum assessment and instruction, nothing under finance. Under operations, A, approval of partnership agreement with the University of Jamestown. Is there a motion? Motion by Jacob. Second by Aaron. We have a motion and a second for approval of partnership agreement with the University of Jamestown. Any discussion? Any discussion? And we had a couple conflicts on this vote. Melissa and I. Being no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. And I'll have Dr. Leck sign that. Under personnel, review and approval of notice of recognition of representative organizations for negotiation. Number 1 and 2, the administrator unit and the teacher unit. These documents do look familiar to you. The previous ones did not have the signatures, and so we're approving it all with the signatures included at this meeting. Is there a motion? Is there a special motion? Are we okay? Yep, it's okay. Aaron, motion by Aaron. Is there a second? Second by Dan. We have a motion and a second for approval of review and approval of notice of recognition of representative organizations for negotiations. Number 1, administrator unit. Number 2, teacher unit. Dr. Luck, you had a comment?
Yeah, and just for a point of clarification, what you're looking at here is you're looking at page 2 and lower. Your responsibility right now is to ensure that the signatures represent 50% plus 1 of the units. When we did our review, they're much more than that 50%. So, that has been reviewed, and they do represent 50% plus 1, or more than 50% plus 1, in both the administrators and teachers.
Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. B, approval to hire for the 2025 to 2026 school year upon a successful background check and receipt of licensure. Huzana Watko. Is there a motion? Motion by Jamie. Second by Steve. We have a motion and a second for approval to hire for the 2025 to 2026 school year upon a successful background check and receipt of licensure. Huzana Watko. Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. C, approval of resignation at the conclusion of the 2024 to 2025 school year. Number 1, Zebedee Wheeler and Caitlin Coast. Is there a motion? Motion by Melissa. Second by Dan. We have a motion and a second for approval of resignation at the conclusion of the 2024 to 2025 school year. Zebedee Wheeler and Caitlin Coast. Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. And welcome, Hosanna, and thank you for your service, Zebedee and Caitlin. D, update of leave of absence request for the 2024 to 2025 school year. Number 1, Ben Smith. And for this, there's a motion in the superintendent report. Aaron?
So I move to accept the voluntary resignation and waiver of the right to reemployment for Ben Smith.
Is there a second? Second by Jason. We have a motion and a second to update a leave of absence request for the 2024-2025 school year. Number 1, Ben Smith. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. And thank you, Ben, for your service to our district. E, we have the approval of the superintendent's evaluation that is, we'll start on that in a second. I just want a couple comments. I met with, reviewed everyone's comments, and the comments are always helpful. And I spent last Wednesday, I met with Dr. Leck. We talked about a few different topics. We talked quite a bit about the strategic plan, which has been, it kind of puts us all on the same page and helps us move in the same direction. And the progress monitoring has some accountability to that. And I also, we also visited, I think it also might be a good idea for our strategic plan committee to, we haven't met for a little while, just to meet and kind of regroup and kind of review things as well. So we'll put that on the calendar in the future. The other area of discussion was, we talked about communication and maybe either what other kinds of communication channels that we could maybe use to reach a little bit broader outside of just our families and our districts on our listservs. And so we talked about some different ideas there as well. And then we also talked about the timeliness of the the agenda and those kinds of things. And Dr. Leck and Amy are trying to start populating the Google Drive now on Tuesday and Wednesday. Not all the links will be active, but the documents will start to be populated. And when you receive the email on Friday, that means everything is done. But if you want to get a head start on, because we've had a lot of information in the last few weeks to review, and if you want to get a little bit of a head start on Tuesday or Wednesday, and that can be something to look forward to. Back to the communication, I think even just moving forward with some of the initiatives in our district, even in some of our subcommittees, we could even have some discussion in those as well, whether it be facilities or strategic planning, or we can also just make sure that we also discuss that communication piece of what we're doing. So, any questions from the board before we move forward with this? Okay. So for these evaluations, we have 6 sections, 1 through 6. For each section, I will name the section and the score. The score is on a Likert scale for the public's information, a scale of 1 through 4, number 1 being ineffective and number 4 being highly effective. So it's out of 4. And what I'm looking for from the board is either a motion of satisfactory or a motion of unsatisfactory for each section. So we'll go through each 6 parts. Any questions on that before we get started? Okay. Section 1 is goal and vision setting. That is a score of 3.64. Is there a motion of satisfactory or a motion of unsatisfactory for Section 1 goal and vision setting? Dan?
I move a rating of satisfactory.
We have a motion of satisfactory. Is there a second? Second by Owen. We have a motion and a second for satisfactory for Section 1 goal and vision setting. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Moving on to Section 2, Board Relations. That is a score of 3.66 out of 4. Is there a motion for satisfactory or unsatisfactory for Section 2, Board Relations? Jason?
I would move for a satisfactory rating under Section 2, Board Relations.
We have a motion for a approval of satisfactory rating for Section 2. Is there a second? Second by Jamie. We have a motion, a second for Section 2, Board Relations. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Moving on to Component 3, Human Resource Management. Dr. Luck received a rating of 3.42 out of 4 for Component 3, Human Resource Management. Is there a motion for satisfactory or unsatisfactory rating for Component 3? We have a motion by Melissa for a satisfactory rating. Is there a second? Second by Steve. We have a motion, a second for satisfactory rating for Component 3, Human Resource Management. Any discussion? Any discussion? Assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Moving on to Section 4, Curriculum and Student Support Services. Dr. Luck received a 3.48 out of 4 rating. Is there a motion for satisfactory or unsatisfactory rating in Section 4?
I move for a satisfactory rating on Section 4, Curriculum and Student Support Services.
Motion by Aaron for a satisfactory rating in Section 4. Is there a second? Second by Jacob. We have a motion, a second for Section 4, Curriculum and Student Support Services. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Section 5, Community Relations. Dr. Luck received a 3.43 out of 4 rating for Section 5. Is there a motion of satisfactory or unsatisfactory rating for Section 5? Owen?
For a satisfactory rating for Section 5 community relations.
We have a motion for satisfactory rating for Section 5. Is there a second by Owen? Is there a second? second by Dan. So we have a motion and a second for Section 5, Community Relations, for a satisfactory rating. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. This is our last section, Section 6, Operations and Resource Management. Dr. Luck received a 3.70 out of 4 rating for Section 6. Is there a motion for satisfactory or unsatisfactory rating for Section 6? Jamie. Jamie, motion for Section 6 for a satisfactory rating. Is there a second? Second by Melissa. We have a motion, a second for satisfactory rating for Section 6, Operations and Resource Management. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. We've completed that, and we'd like to thank Dr. Luck for serving in our district. Do you have a comment?
I do. I always appreciate the feedback that I get. It always matters quite a bit to me. I like the discussions that Heidi and I, or the board president and I, get to have about what is occurring that we want to continue or expand in areas of improvement. And you know, Dr. Larson talked about those already, but I take all of the feedback that I get very seriously, so thank you for taking the time to provide some critical feedback so we can continue to drive for improvement. One other comment that I wanted to make is that sometimes opportunities present themselves that makes sense to explore. In my case, that was an opportunity that I felt like needed to be considered. And as it relates to hiring anybody that's ever worked with me in a hiring process knows that I believe beyond anything it's about fit. One of the things that was reinforced to me throughout this process that I got to explore recently is that I fit best here at Jamestown Public Schools. And I'm beyond thankful to lead this district and to work alongside really very talented, dedicated, and just fantastic educators that work here. So thank you for that opportunity to continue to learn and lead alongside them. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Luck. All right. Any other comments from the board or questions? Okay. Moving on, under policies and procedures, we have nothing under tuition or other. Items for future agenda. Do you have any items for future agenda? If so, just let Dr. Luck and myself know. Steve?
This isn't future agenda, but on the superintendent evaluation, did we have to do an overall? Okay.
Thanks for the question, Steve. For these, we do each section separately. So I think years ago it was a little bit different, but yeah. Dr. Luck.
I have one potential, at least a work session concept. Mr. Gaylor and I were talking about, see, I'm thinking ahead, Adam, Dr. Gaylor. Mr. Gaylor and I were talking about, and there's been some discussion at the board level around standards-based learning, standards-based grading. As Mr. Gaylor and I talked, we thought maybe there's an opportunity to expand, and not necessarily a new board member orientation or onboarding, but if there is an opportunity to have a work session with board members that are interested around standards-based grading, a place where you can go to ask questions, a place you can go to get a little bit more information. We're going to work on finding a date sometime at 4:30, prior to a regular board meeting for the board to come in. And so if you have questions about standards-based learning, if you have anything in particular that you want to spend some time getting some additional information on or asking questions, just let us know. Not a requirement that the board members would attend, but if it's something you feel like you need more, if you have questions you want answered, just email us, Mr. Gaylor or myself, let us know, and we'll schedule something so we can, to continue to educate the board on standards-based learning, okay?
Thank you. Any other items that came to mind as we were thinking here? Okay. Meetings to be scheduled. We have a district improvement meeting on Thursday, March 6th, 2025 at 3:30 p.m. in the media room at the high school. Health Insurance Committee meeting on Monday, March 10th, 2025 at 3:45 p.m. in the district office conference room. We have a regular school board meeting on Monday, March 17th, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room at the middle school. Are we missing any committee meetings that you know of? Okay. Do we feel like facilities needs to come together again as you get more finite boundaries, as you get more information?
Well, the Facilities Committee will need to meet in the next month or so to talk about summer projects planning and updating the extended capital projects plan. And if there is any important topics related to boundaries, we can add it to that agenda.
Add that agenda. That'd be great. Yep. And I appreciate I know the Facilities Committee is met probably more often than other committees, but I do appreciate their time. So thank you, Aaron, Jason, and Steve. Appreciate your time. Strategic planning, I think we'll try to, within the next month or so, maybe not necessarily before the next meeting, but in the next month or so, just meet as we move into the next fiscal year, just review things if that works for everyone. Next on our agenda, we have possible executive session to discuss negotiation strategies. Okay, no motion. And then we have monthly superintendent evaluation, Section 2, Board Relations, and Section 3, Human Resource Management. Please complete that. There being no further business before the board, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your time.